With the release of Horus Heresy's 3rd edition, I feel now's a good time to discuss the topic of Loyalist word-bearers. So the word-bearers were fairly unique amongst the traitor legions in that they had effectively purged themselves of all Loyalist elements prior to the onset of the Horus Heresy itself. Like, even before the events of Istvan III, they had purged themselves of all Loyalists, effectively. And this was even reflected on the tabletop, because, from what I can remember at least, if I'm getting it wrong then please leave a comment down below, but from what I can recall, the word-bearers were the sole traitor legion to effectively be loyalty locked, in that you could only play them as a traitor legion. Like, for example, with the Sons of Horus, if you played Loyalist Sons of Horus, then you could use characters like Garvey or Loken, but if you played traitors, then you could use guys like Abaddon. But this was not the case with the word-bearers. From what I can remember at least, the word-bearers were a traitor-only army. But this seems to have changed following the release of 2nd edition, in that every single legion could be played as either Loyalists or traitors. And the justification for this came within, I believe, the Siege of Cthonia campaign book, in where it was stated that there were entire companies of Loyalist word-bearers who just so happened to be away on a mission when the initial purgings of the Legion began. So these ones never fell to chaotic corruption and thus remained loyal to the Imperium. And from a gameplay perspective, I totally get it. I completely get it because, more options and variety on the tabletop, that's always going to be a net positive. That's always going to be a good thing to give players more options, more choice. Always going to be a good thing. But from a storyline/lore perspective, I personally really do not like it. And the reason why is because I feel the existence of entire companies of Loyalist word-bearers, I feel that invalidates the entire story of Bethusda Narek. Now, for those who may not be aware, Bethusda Narek was, for all intents and purposes, the only Loyalist word-bearer, for a long time at the very least. He was effectively, not literally, because yes, I know guys like the Anchorite exist, but effectively, he was the only Loyalist word-bearer. And because he was the only Loyalist, he was effectively forced to become a secret Loyalist. For lack of a better term, he was a double agent. Like, he would still fight alongside the traitor word-bearers, still commit heinous atrocities and all that, still, oh yes, praise Lorgar, praise Chaos, yada yada yada. But because he knew he was just one man, and if he ever went public with his true loyalties he'd just be killed, his entire mission pretty much boiled down to him trying to find a way to assassinate Lorgar, with the idea being that if he managed to pull that off, it wouldn't matter if he died afterwards because he would have taken out a massive threat to the Imperium. And I feel that he had a fantastic story. There was so much potential in his plot arc, there was so much good going about it. Granted, with the release of Era of Ruin, his story came to an unceremonious end, but I'm not going to go into spoilers right now, I'll just leave it at that. But regardless, I feel that having entire companies of Loyalist word-bearers just makes his story seem that much weaker. Like I said, from a gameplay standpoint, I totally understand why, and I even support it. I completely understand why. It's totally justifiable, don't get me wrong. But it still doesn't change the fact that I feel like it completely invalidates one of the most interesting characters in the entire Horus Heresy setting. Because we've got plenty of instances of Loyalists from the traitor legions who are like, I'm loyal to the Emperor, death to Horus, this, that, and the other. Guys like, Garvey or Loken, or Nathaniel Garrow, or Mesa Varan. We got plenty of guys like that. But we've never had any other characters like Bethusda Narek, in that they are a double agent. They are forced to keep their true allegiances a secret. And that just has so much potential for storytelling purposes, it's so good, and it's been completely wasted. I know this is more of a complaint of his fate in Era of Ruin more than anything else, but it doesn't change the fact that I think, from a storyline perspective, making it so that there were whole groups of Loyalist word-bearers was a mistake, personally. But again, from a gameplay perspective, I totally get it, I understand, I support it, so it's kind of hard to just pick one because both sides make valid points in that the gameplay is important, but the story is also important, so take your pick, but whatever. I'm just rambling now, but that's my basic take on the idea of there being Loyalist word-bearers. And while I'm here, because I don't know when I'm going to get another chance to talk about this, and it's tangentially related, so fuck it. Let's talk about the idea of the Blood Ravens being a Wordbearer successor chapter. Now, this is an idea that has gained quite a bit of traction in recent years, and from what I can gather, the main argument for this is that the Blood Ravens' homeworld is the planet Cyrene, which is in subsector Aurelia. Cyrene being, seemingly named after Cyrene Valantian, and subsector Aurelia being seemingly named after Lorgar Aurelian, the Wordbearer's Primarch. However, I don't think that this in itself is enough to draw a connection between the Wordbearers and the Blood Ravens, because to me, all this tells me is that this region of space was brought into compliance by the Wordbearers during the Great Crusade. And it's not unreasonable to think that because the Scarus sector, from what I can recall at least, from what I remember off the top of my head, this video is unscripted, so apologies if I'm rambling, but, again, it is unscripted. But yeah, the Scarus sector was brought into compliance by the Wordbearers during the Great Crusade, and was even named after an officer of the Wordbearers Legion. I can't remember if he was a praetor or at the time the Legion commander, or just, a chapter master, effectively for lack of a better term, but it was named after an officer of the Legion. So the Scarus sector, which is still being referred to as such by the modern Imperium, is still named after a Wordbearer, even if the majority of the Imperium these days don't realise it. So I feel it's more likely that subsector Aurelia was also brought into compliance by the Wordbearers during the Great Crusade. It seems to make more sense than, the Blood Ravens being a Wordbearer successor chapter, in my honest opinion. I mean, there's more evidence for it than, say, the Red Hunters being a Wordbearer successor, because I've seen people argue that the Red Hunters are a Wordbearer successor purely on the basis that they have red armor. That means jack shit, to be honest, because Loyalist Wordbearers had grey armor, not red. Red was the traitor color. The Loyalist color was grey. So that connection is just, weak as piss. Sorry, but anyway, again, I'm just waffling on. It's very hot, but yeah, I think that pretty much covers my thoughts, but I'd like to hear what you guys think of the idea of Loyalist Wordbearers, so leave a comment down below, and until next time, this has been Remleiz from 40k Theories, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye!